Sometimes all we need is to stop. Stop in the middle of the day. Stop mid-thought. Stopping in the middle of the rush that we learned to call life. Imagine yourself walking through an ancient forest where the air is fresher and the silence is not empty, but alive. The distant sound of water running between rocks. The slow rustle of leaves. The feeling that something is watching, not to judge, but to simply be. There are places in the world where this feeling is not strange. It's familiar, as if the invisible had always been there waiting for someone to notice. What if the sacred were not far away? What if he didn't live in books, rules, or future promises? What if the divine breathed right where you step now? We live in a time that taught us to separate everything, mind and body, human and nature, reason and spirit. We learn to look at the world as a setting, as a resource, as something external. But there are ancient traditions that never accepted this division. Silent paths that have always known that life does not happen on the earth. It happens with the earth. Shintoism was born from this perspective, not as a doctrine, but as a listening, a deep listening to nature, cycles, ancestors, and invisible forces that permeate every moment. He begins not with questions about what we should believe, but with a simpler and more difficult question. Are you present? Present when water touches your hands. Present when the wind changes direction. Present when something inside you becomes silent for a moment. This video is not an invitation to follow a religion. It is an invitation to remember. Remember that perhaps the world has never been mute, that maybe the sacred never left, that maybe we've just forgotten how to look. Along this path, we will explore what Shintoism is, where it comes from, what its principles are, and most importantly, what its focus is. But we will do this as someone walking barefoot, with care, silence, and reverence. If you feel like there is something invisible guiding your days, even when you can't explain what, this video is for you. Take a deep breath. The path starts now. Shintoism did not arise from an enlightened founder, a unique revelation, or a book written to explain the world. It was born from something much simpler and more profound. The intimate coexistence between human beings and nature. Before there were temples, names, or concepts, there were people watching the sky, feeling the strength of the mountains, fearing storms, and thanking the earth for food. Shintoism begins at this silent era of history, when human beings still did not see themselves as separated from the environment around them. In the ancient communities of the Japanese archipelago, life depended directly on natural cycles. Harvests followed the rhythm of the seasons, fishing depended on the tides, and survival was linked to the ability to perceive subtle signs from nature. In this context, rivers, forests, rocks, and natural phenomena were not inanimate objects but living presences, endowed with intention and strength. Spirituality emerged naturally from this relationship of respect, care, and constant attention. Unlike traditions that try to explain the origin of the universe through abstract narratives, Shintoism is not concerned with answering how it all began in cosmic terms. Your focus is on the now, on the place where life happens. The sacred is not in the distant past, nor in a promised future, but in direct contact with that which sustains existence. The origin of Shintoism, therefore, is not a specific event, but an ongoing process of recognizing the invisible in the visible. Over time, these customs and perceptions became organized into simple rituals, offerings of food, gestures of gratitude, moments of silence in front of places considered special. These places were not chosen at random. An ancient tree, an imposing waterfall, or a mountain shrouded in mist naturally awakened the feeling that there was something larger than human there. Not greater in the sense of absolute power, but greater in the sense of depth and mystery. As Japanese society became more complex, these practices did not disappear. On the contrary, they were preserved and integrated into everyday life. Even when writing arrived and the first records were made, Shinto already existed as a living experience. The texts only tried to record what had already been felt for generations. Therefore, understanding the origin of Shintoism is understanding that it was not created, but perceived. This spiritual birth did not happen in opposition to practical life. There was no separation between work, nature, and spirituality. Planting, harvesting, building, Being born and dying were part of the same flow. Spirituality did not require separation from the world, but full presence in it. This characteristic has profoundly shaped Japanese culture, influencing everything from architecture to the way silence and space are valued. To the looking at this origin, it is clear that Shintoism does not try to convince anyone of anything. It does not impose beliefs. It does not establish universal truths. It just points to something that has always been there, the feeling that life is crossed by forces that we cannot control, but with which we can learn to live. This ancestral perception is the soil upon which all the rest of Shintoism is built. At the heart of Shinto is a simple but profoundly transformative idea. The world is not empty of spirit. Everything that exists can be inhabited by an invisible presence, a subtle force that animates, connects, and gives meaning to life. These presences are called kami. However, understanding what kami are requires us to abandon common notions of gods as entities that are distant, absolute, or separate from the human world. Kami do not live outside of reality. They do not observe the world from a higher plane. They are within the flow of life. A river can be a kami. A mountain can be a kami. The spirit of an ancestor, an ancient tree, a rock shaped by time, the wind that suddenly changes direction, all can express this presence. The kami is not defined by form, but by relationship. It manifests where there is intensity, mystery, vitality, or reverence. This way of perceiving the sacred completely changes the way human beings position themselves in the world. If everything can be inhabited by a kami, then nothing is just a thing. Nature stops being a setting and becomes a participant. The environment stops being a resource to be explored and becomes a space for coexistence. It's not about worshiping everything, but recognizing that everything deserves attention and respect. In Shintoism, there is no rigid hierarchy among kami. Some are more widely recognized, others are local, almost intimate. There are kami linked to specific villages, families, professions, and recurring natural phenomena. This diversity reflects the diversity of life itself. The sacred is not uniform, and neither is the world. Each place has its spirit. Each story carries its presence. This view contrasts sharply with the modern experience of separation. Today, many live surrounded by concrete, screens, and constant noise, far from natural rhythms. In this context, the feeling of emptiness and disconnection becomes common. The concept of kami appears as a silent reminder that this separation is not natural, but constructed. The spiritual presence has not disappeared. It just stopped being noticed. When Shintoism speaks of approaching the kami, it does not speak of submission or fear. Talk about tune. Getting closer means listening, observing, caring. It's about entering a natural space with attention. It's recognizing that certain places call for silence, that certain actions require care, that certain attitudes break the invisible balance that sustains coexistence between humans and the world. Shinto rituals exist precisely to facilitate this approach. They are not used to convince a kami to do something, but to align the human being with the environment. Cleaning your hands with water, bowing, offering a simple gesture of gratitude, all of this prepares the body and mind to notice what normally goes unnoticed. Ritual does not create the sacred. It removes the excess that prevents you from feeling it. There is also a deeply human dimension to this relationship. Many kami are linked to ancestors, not as idealized figures, but as presences who continue to participate in the flow of life. Honoring ancestors is recognizing that existence does not begin or end in a single body. Each person is a continuation of something bigger, of a living history that spans generations. When understanding the kami, Shinto does not offer definitive answers about the world. He offers a stance, a way of being, a way of walking with more attention, more respect, and less arrogance. The invisible does not require blind belief. It reveals itself naturally to those who learn to observe without rushing. It is in this space of listening that Shinto finds its quietest depth. 3 ideas run through Shintoism in a silent and constant way: purity, impermanence, and harmony. They do not appear as moral rules or abstract concepts, but as direct observations of life. Shintoism is based on the understanding that human beings, like nature, are always in movement. Nothing remains intact for long, and that is precisely why care for balance becomes essential. The notion of purity in Shintoism is not related to sin or guilt. Purity does not mean being perfect, correct, or error-free. It refers to a state of clarity, of alignment with the natural flow of life. Impurity, in turn, arises when there is an accumulation of tension, of emotional exhaustion, of repetitive thoughts, of undigested experiences. Living inevitably generates this accumulation. Therefore, purification is not an exception, but a recurring necessity. Water plays a central role in this process because it symbolizes renewal. Washing your hands, face, or simply being close to water is not a superstitious gesture, but a bodily reminder that what weighs you down can be released. Just as a river does not carry indefinitely what falls into its bed, human beings were also not made to retain everything. Purification in this sense is a return to the natural state, not a moral correction. This view connects directly to the idea of impermanence. Shinto recognizes that everything changes: the climate, the body, feelings, circumstances. Trying to freeze life in an ideal state creates suffering. When it is accepted that change is part of the natural order, the effort stops being resisting and becomes accompanying. The seasons teach this clearly. None of them try to go on longer than necessary. Each one fulfills their role and leaves at the right time. Impermanence also manifests itself in the understanding of human life. Birth and death are not treated as opposing events, but as parts of the same cycle. There is no obsession with what comes next nor excessive fear of the end. There is respect for the process. The focus is on living in an aligned way while you are here, knowing that everything that arises also transforms. Harmony, in turn, is not a permanent state of tranquility. She is a constant adjustment. Harmony is realizing when something has gone off track and acting gently to restore balance. This applies to the body, to relationships, and to the environment. In Shintoism, the individual does not exist in isolation. He is part of a living network. When a part becomes unbalanced, the whole feels it. This awareness generates an implicit ethics, not based on commandments, but on sensitivity. If everything is interconnected, acting carelessly affects more than just the person acting. Disrespecting nature, for example, is not just an environmental problem, but a spiritual one, not because there is divine punishment, but because it breaks the harmony that sustains human life itself. In the modern world, where speed and excess are normalized, these ideas become even more relevant. Constant tiredness, anxiety, and a feeling of disconnection can be seen as signs of accumulation. Shintoism does not propose solutions great for that. He proposes attention, small gestures of care, conscious pauses, contact with nature, and respect for one's own limits. If this idea resonates with you, it is a sign that something inside has already begun to reorganize itself. Purity is not a distant ideal. She is a return. Impermanence is not a threat. It's a reminder. And harmony is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to return to center whenever necessary. The focus of Shinto is not on explaining the world, but on teaching how to inhabit the world. Unlike traditions that focus on salvation, redemption, or absolute truths, Shinto directs its attention to the quality of human presence in the here and now. It doesn't ask what you believe, but how you live, how you relate, and how you take care of the space you occupy. Living in tune, within this vision, means recognizing that life is not something to be dominated, but accompanied. The human being is not the center of the universe, nor an intruder in it. It is part of a larger movement made up of natural cycles, invisible forces, and continuous relationships. When this awareness is lost, excess, exploitation, and imbalance arise. When it is restored, a simpler, more attentive, and respectful way of life emerges. Shintoism does not encourage withdrawal from the world or denial of human desires. Working, building, creating, loving, and seeking comfort are not seen as spiritual problems. The problem arises when these actions are done without listening, without limits, and without reverence. The focus is not to eliminate desire, but to align desire with the natural flow of life. It is to act without breaking the balance that sustains both the individual and the collective. This harmony also manifests itself in the relationship with time. Shintoism does not value haste or accumulation. He recognizes that everything has its rhythm, and that forcing processes creates wear and tear. Just as a plant does not grow faster by being pulled, human life does not become better by being constantly accelerated. Respecting the timing of things is a form of silent wisdom. Another central aspect of the Shinto focus is care for space. Places matter, not just in a physical sense, but spiritually. A house, a temple, a street, or a natural landscape bear marks of the human actions that took place there. Taking care of a space means taking care of the energy that circulates in it. Therefore, cleaning, organization, and respect are not just practical habits, but spiritual gestures. On a personal level, living in tune involves paying attention to one's own internal states. The body is seen as part of nature, not as something separate from it. Fatigue, tension, and illness are signs that something has gone off track. Instead of ignoring these signs, Shinto invites you to listen to them. Adjust the rhythm, purify air what weighs, restore harmony before imbalance becomes rupture. This stance also influences the way we live in the community. Shintoism values harmonious coexistence not through the imposition of rigid rules, but through a sense of belonging. When the individual understands that he is part of something bigger, his actions naturally become more careful, not out of fear of punishment, but out of awareness of the invisible consequences of each gesture. In essence, the focus of Shinto is simple and profound: to live so that human presence does not interrupt the flow of life, but moves with it. It is a constant invitation to attention, humility, and care. There is no promise of perfection, only the possibility of alignment. And this alignment does not happen once, but is renewed every day, in each silent choice. Living according to Shinto principles in the modern world does not mean abandoning the city, technology, or contemporary life. It means, rather, changing the way we position ourselves within this context. The biggest current challenge is not the lack of spirituality, but the excess of noise, stimuli, and disconnection with natural rhythms. Shintoism offers a silent response to this scenario: relearning to perceive. Today, many people live almost completely focused on the future or stuck in the past. They constantly plan, accumulate information, worry about results, and rarely fully inhabit the present moment. This way of living generates anxiety, chronic tiredness, and a persistent feeling of emptiness. Shinto does not diagnose this as an isolated psychological problem, but as a progressive withdrawal from the direct experience of life. In modern everyday life, nature is often reduced to a distant background. Even when talking about the environment, it often happens in an abstract way, disconnected from personal experience. Shinto proposes the opposite movement, bringing attention back to real contact. A tree observed daily, the change in light throughout the day, the sound of rain, care for a small space. These simple gestures restore a relationship that has been weakened over time. Technology, within this vision, is not the enemy. It becomes problematic only when it completely breaks the link with the body, with silence, and with the surroundings. Shintoism does not ask for rejection, but for balance. Use modern tools without losing sensitivity. Recognize when excess stimuli begin to cloud perception. Create conscious breaks so the mind can reorganize. Another important aspect in today's world is the relationship with work and productivity. Many people define themselves exclusively by what they produce, their performance, and the results they deliver. This creates a fragile identity, constantly threatened by comparison and the fear of failure. Shintoism does not deny the value of work, but reminds us that it is only a part of life, not its absolute center. Working in tune means acting with dedication without losing yourself. Human relationships are also profoundly affected by the modern rhythm. The rush, constant distraction, and superficial communication make it difficult to be truly present. Shintoism values full attention to others, not as a technique, but as a natural posture. Being truly present in a conversation, listening without anticipating answers, respecting silence when necessary. These simple gestures restore harmony in relationships. Even in urban environments, it is possible to live according to this sensitivity. A symbolic altar at home, a daily moment of silence, a gesture of gratitude before starting the day. None of this requires formal belief. It just requires intention and constancy. Shinto manifests itself less in grand declarations and more in small choices repeated over time. In the modern world, where almost everything is fast-paced, Shinto acts as a discrete counterpoint. It does not promise quick fixes or permanent states of well-being. It invites you to slow down your gaze, take care of what is close by, and recognize that life continues to pulsate, even beneath layers of concrete and distraction. Living this spirituality today is, above all, an act of attention. When reaching the end of this path, it will perhaps become clear that Shintoism does not present itself as a definitive answer, but as a change of attitude towards life. It does not seek to replace beliefs, nor to compete for space with other traditions. His gesture is quieter. It simply invites human beings to remember that they have never been separated from the world they inhabit, that the ground beneath your feet, the air that enters your lungs, and the time that passes through your body have always been part of the same living experience. By understanding its origin, its principles, and its focus, we realize that Shinto was not created to be followed, but to be lived. It is born from attention, sustained by care and renewed by presence. It does not require elaborate words or complex explanations. It only requires provision ion to understand what is already there. The sacred does not need to be sought far away, because it has never been far away. In a world that insists on speeding up everything, Shinto teaches us to slow down our gaze. In a time that values excess, he points to enough. In a culture that fragments, he remembers the totality. This spirituality does not promise control over destiny, nor ready-made answers for the future. It offers something simpler and, perhaps for that reason, rarer: alignment with the flow of life. Living according to this sensitivity does not mean achieving a permanent state of peace. It means recognizing when balance is lost and having the humility to return. It means accepting impermanence without fear, caring for purity without guilt, and seeking harmony without rigidity. Every everyday gesture becomes an opportunity for reconnection. Each conscious pause, a small ritual. Each relationship, a space of mutual care. Perhaps the greatest teaching of Shintoism is this: life does not need to be conquered. She needs to be accompanied. When human beings stop placing themselves above nature and learn to walk with it, something silently reorganizes itself. The world does not change in a spectacular way, but the way of being in it changes. If this content has brought you clarity, calm, or awakened something that was dormant, consider continuing this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel and continue exploring paths that combine silence, nature, and inner depth. There is still much to be understood when we learn to listen more carefully. And before closing, let one last question echo, without rushing for an answer. And if what you call chance, what if what you call destiny, is just the silent whisper of the kami who have walked beside you since the beginning, waiting for the moment when you finally decide to listen?